Boys Season 4 recently ended on Amazon, but many fans complained that the show suddenly went woke because prior to this season, Amazon dropped a teaser poster of Homelander with the slogan "Make America Super Again." This pissed off a lot of fans of the show who, for some reason, didn't realize this show's political commentary was in fact inspired by real-world American politics. The very first episode features the Deep coercing Starlight into a sexual act by threatening her position in the Seven, and this is a direct representation of the sort of behavior that induced the Me Too movement. The show has always been open about its commentary, which we see further on in Season 1 with the massive Believe Expo that criticizes Christian supremacists and the way some religious people force their opinions down everyone's throat. And Season 2 had Stormfront, with the show combining more subtle moments such as her killing black residents of a building for no reason other than their race, with more outright racist moments like calling Kenji a slur and saying Stan Edgar is
pretty smart, especially for his kind.
This latter comment has always felt a bit forced. Like, I don't think I ever really heard a racist phrase it quite like that. Season 4 does the same thing though, with Firecracker's more subtle microaggression, calling Sage uppity, contrasted with the Force dialogue when Tech Knight looks A-Train in the eye and talks about his ancestors being slave catchers. Season 3 gets even more obvious with the direct satire on police brutality in America with the character of Blue Hawk. Someone in the crowd even yells out "Black Lives Matter," in case you hadn't connected the dots yet. So if the corporate and political satire in this show hasn't really changed, it's the story itself. This season feels inconsistent, disjointed, and overly manufactured. Now, I'm not going to compare too much with previous seasons because frankly, to do an accurate comparison, I'd have to rewatch them since I forgot much of the actual storytelling aspect. But this season, it feels like the writers are making things up on the spot, throwing in random new character arcs and plot points to fill out a season's worth of story. Everything about it feels shoehorned in. Every single one of our main characters apparently has some surprise dark secret now. Like, surprise, Frenchie killed Colin's family, and surprise, Kimiko killed girls in a fighting ring, and surprise, Annie blinded a mom in Walmart. Like, I was half expecting them to say, surprise, MM used to run a farm animals hate club. Annie's abortion felt like a storyline the show might actually walk us through, but instead it's just another surprise reveal from Firecracker. And then there's Butcher, who at the end of episode 4 is like, surprise, I secretly took Compound V off screen before the season started because I randomly found it in Frenchie's stuff. And let's talk about Butcher, actually. His character this season was written kind of weird. He's got this fight inside of him personified by seeing Rebecca and Kessler, but haven't we literally seen him go through this character arc for 3 seasons already? In the season 3 finale, he went back on his deal with Soldier Boy because of Ryan, after previously rejecting Ryan earlier in the season. And now we're supposed to believe that this V he took is causing him to fight between his light and dark sides just out of nowhere? It reads like they reverse engineered this from the plot point of Butcher taking out Newman, as if they couldn't figure out any other way to get him there. The part they should have focused on was his reluctance to become a Soup after spending a lifetime chasing them. His final phone call scene with Huey still works with this version. Him not wanting to give in to Kessler because Kessler wants him to kill all the Soups is stupid, but him not wanting to give in to the V because that would mean permanently becoming what he hates, and this is why he's so sick, that makes perfect sense. Also, I don't always have an issue with characters talking to people who aren't there, or talking to people who died as a way of verbalizing internal conflict, but in this particular case, once Butcher realizes Kessler is just his imagination, the dialogue from imaginary Kessler suddenly gets so corny.
If your love was so perfect and pure, then why'd you fuck that waitress? You know, you keep saying that you're doing all this to honor Becca's memory. Never did that when she was alive.
And again, it's like, surprise, Butcher cheated on Becca. Like, no, he didn't. You just made that up. It almost feels like a retcon, throwing in this random crap that supposedly happened in the past just to create conflict in the present. I hate it when shows do this because it signifies that they want the character to struggle with something, but they had to make something up to make that actually happen. They did this with Starlight too, multiple times. The abortion thing didn't feel like a retcon, it just felt more like something they avoided showing us in favor of a surprise. But the Walmart thing came out of nowhere. Accidental blinding while learning to control your powers is one thing, but then smiling about it like you saved everyone is another. And I feel like young Starlight would have immediately been plagued by what she did and struggled with it, because remember when we first meet her, she tells people at her audition to turn away, indicating she's witnessed a negative experience involving her powers. She even goes to them right away, asking if they're okay. And sure, Firecracker's the one who said Annie was smiling like nothing happened, but Annie didn't contest that with, oh, I went to go check on the lady right away. Also, the fact that as a pageant kid, she called Firecracker a fat slut and spread a nasty rumor about her. This feels like a major character contradiction and something they only threw in because I guess they needed Firecracker to have some personal vendetta. I hate that, because why can't she just be a nasty person who capitalizes on an easily manipulated demographic? From her initial conversation with Sage, she explicitly states that her audience is men who are told by mainstream media to be ashamed of their skin color, which is how these people interpret calls to educate the public on past racial violence to prevent it in the present. They could have woven her backstory from something to do with that. Meanwhile, Annie in season 1 deals with cracks in her perception of the superhero landscape she idolized all her life and feels like her past was a lie, especially with the Believe Expo and then finding out about Compound V. If there was going to be a story about blinding a mom and being mean during pageants, it would have been there. We even get a glimpse into the pageant life later in season 3 when she utilizes a coping mechanism from those days to stomach pretending to be Homelander's girlfriend. The character this show established for her simply doesn't match up with the stuff Firecracker is saying. Then we have this showdown in the last episode with Annie and the Shifter, which is another really bad way of personifying internal conflict. This scene was so hard to watch. It was the corniest, cringiest writing I've seen in this whole show. I hate it when villains are written like this Shifter, where they talk like every line is some huge revelation about the person they're up against, as if they've dissected that person to the core and now they're mocking them in this super corny way. Like, please stop. And then the fight later, Annie gets to be super corny right back, and this this somehow concludes her character arc for this season, which simply involves her struggling with her powers just out of nowhere. And instead of getting a well-written character arc that begins with a traumatizing incident that causes this or brings her back to an earlier state of her superhero experience, developing it from there and diving into her mental state, we just get an exposition-filled conversation with the Shifter. They should have had her talk about this with Huey instead, like maybe he notices the issue and then they talk about it and then there's some action through which she regains her confidence and ability. Both Erin Moriarty as Shifter Annie and Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Kessler were really great in their roles, but their "I know all about you" dialogue falls into the same camp of simply telling the audience what Starlight and Butcher are going through rather than showing us. Similar to Butcher, Frenchie and Kimiko this season are once again going through the exact same things they already dealt with. By this season, both of them have dealt with their past problems, their trauma, their guilt, etc. multiple times. Kimiko's story started with the people who captured her and her brother and turned them into soups. She's been through stuff with her brother, the Liberation Army people, overcoming the trauma of her past, and last season she had a whole arc where she happily lost her powers but chose to get them back. Now all of a sudden there's some secret backstory where they made her fight other girls and she happily killed them, and that's why she couldn't speak even though they said something else for the reasoning before. Massive retcon there. She didn't even genuinely overcome this made up past problem during this season. It was just thrown in there to give her something to do, and then she magically got over it. As for Frenchie, from the moment we met him, he and MM had beef, which we found out in season 2 was because of Lamplight. In season 3, we obviously have Nina and the crimes he committed for her. It's not super far-fetched that Frenchie killed a judge's family for Nina and that the guilt from his time with Nina would catch up to him, but the error lies with the way they executed this. After all this time, he meets this guy Colin, and it just so happens that he's a lone survivor of Frenchie's victims. I saw some people complain about Frenchie being with a dude and how it felt forced, but there's no reason Frenchie can't be bi, and Colin does fit the bill of a typical non-main love interest. Their fling would have been fine if it didn't exclusively exist to guilt trip Frenchie for a few episodes, which eventually leads him to turning himself in. But he literally came back from jail after just one episode. It was written as if the actor had a scheduling conflict and they couldn't have him there for the time they were filming episode 5. This past stuff is only in here to keep Frenchie and Kimiko from getting together, I guess, but honestly, they should never have gotten together to begin with. I might be the only person who watches this show to have this opinion, but I strongly and overwhelmingly preferred these two as friends. Not for a second did I ever see them together as a couple. I don't think they had that sort of chemistry or tension, and especially after Kenji's death, Frenchie seemed to become like Kimiko's surrogate brother, in terms of both the writing and the acting. Even in season 3, Kimiko was like, "You and I are never happening," and now I'm supposed to believe it's because she felt too damaged to be with him? Why is it that when a male and female character are this close, everyone from the writers to the audiences automatically turns them into a couple even though they only have friendship chemistry? It's so rare to see male-female platonic friendships with no inkling of romance. Like across everything I've ever watched, I feel like I can only think of Harry and Hermione from Harry Potter, Uhtred and Hild from The Last Kingdom, and Emily and Nolan from Revenge. And these are all ride or dies. I guarantee that if Kimiko was a guy or if Frenchie was a girl, nobody would think twice about the fact that they were just really good friends. Maybe the writers thought making Kimiko and Frenchie an official couple would strengthen the emotional impact when Kimiko finally shouts no in the same episode. For me, it kind of did the opposite. It would have had more of an impact for me if they had remained friends and didn't have that terribly done arc leading up to it. I mean, they're already so close, but the fact that their arc was done so poorly this season made it feel like once again they started with the scene of her yelling no and worked their way backwards to make up the rest of the season. Neither of them were truly tested or overcame anything this season. Their arcs just felt like filler and had no direct correlation with their season's ending. You could say Frenchie getting pulled away to work for someone else correlates, but given that his reconciliation with working for Nina was in the last season and the guilt stuff was so poorly crafted in this season, his final scene just ends up as wasted potential. Another character that had a random ass journey this season was the Deep. When did he become this unhinged violent guy? He used to be pathetic and afraid of Homelander and the guy everyone else would treat like crap. As Starlight says in the first season, he's just the fish guy. In episode 1 of this season, he was so afraid of Homelander he almost blew A-Train, and why wouldn't he after he was forced to eat Timothy last season? But now he's telling Noir how powerful he feels after killing people and seems to really like it. Why couldn't we see him actually realize this through his actions? I'm not surprised he's like this because of the pilot episode with what he did to Annie and then later on his bitterness about being relocated to Cleveland. We already know he's a terrible person, and the fact that he doesn't really have any power obviously makes him more desperate to feel powerful. Him telling Starlight this season that he's not sorry for anything makes sense with his character. But what gave him the confidence to suddenly switch gears like this? Killing the octopus? After the way he was shocked in episode 1 of this season about Homelander making them kill his supporters? We spent so much time with him and the octopus, but this didn't transition very smoothly into the new Deep. Unless we're supposed to believe his hookups with Sage was the reason for this change? Couldn't they have used his killing of Homelander's supporters as a catalyst for really coming into his own and becoming the person he believes he's meant to be? So many of the main characters this season lack smoothly crafted character journeys, and that includes Homelander and Ryan. But the problem with these two is that even though all their scenes generally feel earned and accurate to the character, there isn't really a logical flow to their development. Season 3 Homelander loved using fear to control the people around him and learned what he could get away with. But season 4 immediately starts with him being unhappy that everyone's doing exactly what he says. That's literally what you wanted. Rather than giving him the time to come to this realization that he needs to surround himself with people who can actually contribute, this sudden characterization only exists because the writers needed him to seek out Sage in the very first episode. He also has this parenting Ryan arc where he shows up during Ryan's solo save, pushes Ryan into accidentally killing a man, then gets confused and irritated when he realizes Ryan was upset about killing Coy and not about Homelander showing up. up. Homelander has this really weird scene where versions of himself from the mirror are talking back at him. Just like with Butcher Aware Kelser and Shifter Annie, the dialogue here feels really corny.
Ryan spent some time with Butcher and boo-hoo, you're a fucking mess.
They did this in season 3 as well, and even then I wasn't a fan.
A dirty, shriveled, anemic little part of you that still mules for approval and love and a mommy and a daddy and boo-hoo.
Yet again, it's like they didn't know how else to show his internal conflict. Despite the mirror scenes in season 3 episode 6 and season 4 episode 3 having the exact same purpose and conclusion regarding what Homelander needs to overcome, only now does it lead to him visiting the old lab in episode 4, where he enacts his sadistic revenge on the people he used to test him. His scenes in this episode felt specifically crafted for the Emmys. It always irks me when I see shows that craft their writing specifically for awards attention. Clearly, they were in the writer's room thinking, how can we dedicate at least half an episode to Homelander being sadistic? And this was the answer. Now, it's not surprising that a newly emboldened Homelander would show up here and deal with the people who tested him, but the way it came about just felt off. It felt so far removed from everything else that's going on. The structure of the episode and cutting away from the scene made the pacing feel slow, and the effects don't last, which I'll get to in a minute. The one thing that redeemed this part of the storyline for me was when that lady came in at the end and said basically you could have left anytime you wanted, but you didn't want to because you were so desperate to be loved. This part, for the time being, it seems to carry into his parenting of Ryan. Episode 5 shows Homelander actually encouraging Ryan to speak up when he doesn't want to do something and speak up about what he does want. But then of course they screw it all up 2 episodes later with Homelander telling Ryan to basically shut up and do the Christmas special. Did the writers just not know what to do with the Ryan Homelander story after episode 5? It feels like such a sharp left turn, like why go through all that trouble anyway? Yeah, Homelander's got other things to worry about, but they could have woven this part of the story more thoroughly with the rest, so that when we get to Homelander lasering the room in the season finale, it could have felt like he at least made more of an effort in his new parenting style and genuinely struggled with the negative side effects of that before losing control in that moment. Ryan's solo character arc feels disjointed as well. We definitely see that this season, with Ryan torn between Butcher and Homelander from episode 1. He visits Butcher against Homelander's wishes, and their talk convinces Butcher not to drug him. Later on, when he refuses to participate in the Christmas special, once again his humanity and compassion convince Butcher to keep his faith in Ryan. But in the middle of all that, we have the scene with Homelander and the writer guy where Ryan essentially has his first power trip. Put together, it feels like Ryan is just a tool for Homelander and Butcher's storylines. Instead of Ryan experiencing organic development and weaving these two sides of him together seamlessly, it's more like insert sympathetic Ryan moment here, insert sadist Ryan moment here, and back and forth. This seemingly comes to a head in the final episode, but all of that just felt ill-timed. Telling Ryan the truth about Homelander and how awful he is was extremely premature, and they only did it to give Butcher a reason to let Kessler take over, which they needed so he could go kill Newman. Was there no other way to bring about anything that happens in the season finale? You'd think that after Ryan heard all that, the next step would be for him to go confront Homelander about it, and that sort of thing seems like a plot point you'd find in the back half of season 5, especially if the show is planning on having father and son face off, which is a likely possibility at this point. Obviously, when season 5 comes, Ryan will see the kind of world his father runs, but it's not like he hasn't already seen that with the Christmas special skit. It would have been okay for there to be that disconnect between what he's seeing Homelander do for the country and his personal experience with his father for most of season 5 as part of his character journey, which would then come to a head with him discovering his father's crimes, which then bridges that gap. Grace Mallory rushing to tell him now is premature, and even if we're meant to believe she's just super desperate to use Ryan against Homelander because she sees no other way, it all feels extremely rushed and underdeveloped. Like, y'all didn't at least try to let him come to the conclusion that Homelander needs to be taken out on his own, trying to trap him in a steel box and basically asking him to become a weapon instead of letting him join the boys for starters. Y'all just didn't think this through at all. And this brings me to the pacing and structure of this season. In addition to the Ryan, Butcher, Mallory stuff being rushed, the first few episodes were off to a weirdly slow start. And the reason for that is most of what happens in these episodes feels irrelevant to the story. Huey's story with his parents and the whole lead up to his dad waking up felt too spread out. Episode 4, as I brought up before with Homelander and the scientists, felt like it should have been a 30-minute bottle episode, but instead it felt like we interrupt this bottle episode to bring you news from elsewhere. The episode 6 dungeon scene dragged on for so long, it was literally just filler while we waited for the crew to get there. The most uncomfortable filler I've ever seen in my entire life. Also, we have Frenchie go to jail for just one episode, meaning his self-pity arc was completely inconsequential, and Annie has an epiphany in one episode after a simple conversation. And in that final episode, Huey has the speech about forgiveness and reconciling with the past, which is definitely good at tying up everything everyone's been through, but everything that led up to it wasn't cohesive, as if they chose to just have this speech tie things up rather than have the character arcs themselves come to a fulfilling close. The plot had some major issues as well, with a lot of stuff happening just to fill out the season. Huey's back-to-back sexual assault was easily the major red flag of this season. The only funny part of the scene in Tech Knight's dungeon was Huey yelling out random words. The rest of it was just super uncomfortable, and the way they used this newly traumatizing event as a 20-minute comedy segment that then leads Huey to realize he misses his dad, wildly inappropriate, and it simply doesn't work. Not to mention how weird it felt that his mom just showed up for those episodes and then dropped out of the picture altogether. But then to make things worse, he then gets essayed again in the next episode with the fake Starlight. From the moment that lady came up to Annie, I knew it was probably the shifter, so when we started the scene with Huey talking to an off-screen Annie and then she came out in the costume, I just knew things were headed in a bad direction, and that made their love scene super uncomfortable. uncomfortable to watch because it's not really Annie. Then the final episode, they do it again like 20 times, and when Annie finds out, she blames Huey for not knowing it was her and says he only wants the perfect version of her. Girl, are you out of your mind? You just went through the corniest conversation on the planet about how you think you're the only good one, and you supposedly overcame that in 2 seconds by killing your double, and your first instinct is to play the victim. It would have been one thing if Huey stood up to her, but instead the show had him be like, actually, I like the version of you that's messy and imperfect, and that's how I knew it wasn't you. Who thought of this? Huey and real Annie's relationship this season was fine as background, but once it became a central conflict in episode 7, the writing just took a massive dive. The show spent way too much time with Huey and shifter Annie, and yet the shifter was still vastly underutilized. Fake Annie proposes to Huey for literally what reason? To lord it over real Annie? The shifter was supposed to take out the president and frame Annie, but got taken out relatively quickly and ultimately didn't do much except for delete the boys' files on Newman, which they didn't end up needing anyway. And again with the pacing and structure thing, it would have had a bigger impact if we were introduced to the shifter earlier in the season, because then the threat of there being a shifter in their midst is carried out longer and can be woven into the plot, character arcs, and themes before the shifter actually takes over Annie. Of course, the shifter only exists because the writers wanted Annie to have a conversation with herself in a different way than Homelander's mirror buddies and Butcher's V-induced hallucinations. The shifter assassin is part of Sage's plan. I had a feeling from the moment we met her that she had something else up her sleeve in joining Vought, in addition to trying out her tactics, and her conversation with Newman gave us some good insight onto how she really feels. The first time she told Homelander that A-Train being the leak was a plan all along, I wasn't surprised. Like, I genuinely buy that she knew and that she planned for this, and I expected she'd be back before the season ended. But when she did come back in episode 8, like, boom, this was still the plan all along, I was like, okay, I guess. I mean, she's really smart, so it's no shocker that she had contingency upon contingency or a million ways to maneuver things. Her having thought of this ahead of time, or having at least accounted for it ahead of time, makes perfect sense to me. Her keeping things from Homelander because of his ego and instability also makes sense. But just the way they reveal it falls into that same pattern I've seen this season, where they go, surprise, let me tell you the secret thing that we kept from you because surprise. That's what it felt like when we found out all the soup saves are staged. It had me wondering if I misinterpreted something, because haven't we seen them on genuine saves? In season 1, Annie talks about how she does her own research when stopping crimes. We see Maeve and Homelander go up to stop that plane. We see the people at Vought talking about save records and such when trying to find new members. And look, it makes sense for Ryan's first save to be staged, but A-Train's as well? That's the part that really had me confused, when his brother came out and said that all of A-Train's saves were fake. Like, really? Why does it feel like they threw that in there just to give more meaning to him saving MM, which I personally think would have carried meaning even if his previous saves were real. My final major gripe with the plot was that no one did anything about Butcher at the end. I get Huey doesn't have powers, and maybe Starlight and Kimiko wouldn't necessarily have been a match for him, and I can buy that Frenchie wouldn't shoot Butcher, but he and Butcher went back and forth this season about leaving the group and their different attitudes towards running things, and I find it maybe not necessarily hard to believe, but definitely a waste of potential that didn't say or do anything. Not even snatching the gun from Frenchie, not even talking to Butcher, just nothing. If they were gonna have Frenchie struggle with this shooting Butcher or not scene, he should have been the one to grapple with the related character arc this season that leads up to this critical moment. And if we're supposed to believe this ties in with his guilt about killing people, it was vastly underdeveloped. But despite all these issues, use of heart-shaped box nearly had me screaming. Longer series, whether in film or television, with more than 3 parts where they have this big bad that needs to be taken down, work really well when they end their penultimate chapter with a dramatic low point in order to maximize the emotion of the final installment. Like in Harry Potter, Half-Blood Prince ends with the worst possible thing that could happen and allows the following installment, or their final chapter, to fall into a totalitarian regime, which is what's coming in The Boys. Going forward, showrunner Eric Kripke said season 5 will be like the show's version of an apocalypse. After that credit scene, the character of Soldier Boy is slated to reappear with the goal of killing Butcher and have a father-son storyline with Homelander. From my perspective, it's pretty likely that Ryan will face off against Homelander, and it would probably be disappointing if he didn't, though obviously I don't expect Ryan to be the one to take him out. It has to be something more than that brings Homelander to his knees. I feel like it's going to require a massive team effort rather than have a simple virus take out the big bad. I don't know where exactly Soldier Boy is going to come into the mix, but he has the ability to strip soups of their powers, so I'm sure there's going to be something in the storyline that has to do with that. I also hope to see Maeve come back for at least a little bit. It would feel weird to end the show without her being present or involved at all. Since Starlight and A-Train are the only ones who managed to escape, I'm thinking maybe they'll have to figure out a way to get everyone else out, and then maybe there's going to be a rescue Frenchie operation with all of them together. I'm assuming that at some point Butcher will have to face recompense, and and Huey will probably be involved in that, especially Huey, whose story has been deeply intertwined with Butcher's from day one, and double especially because of what just happened with Huey being the one to give Victoria a chance to turn herself into the boys, and Butcher essentially screwing them over with what he just did. Ryan will likely be a part of this Butcher storyline as well. I'm not someone who really enjoys heavily speculating on what's to come, and I prefer to just take in new installments when they drop and judge accordingly, but these are just some things that came to mind after finishing the season. I do wonder though how it'll actually end in a way that allows Gen V to continue. I don't watch Gen V, nor do I plan to watch any of the other spin-offs or prequels, but in the case of Gen V, that takes place in between seasons of The Boys. So for that story to continue, I'm guessing there's still going to be problems in this universe after Homelander's gone. But in the meantime, thanks for listening. I'm Harry, and this was Trash Talk Reverse.